I'm going to go grab a pencil and paper just in case I need to write down anything.
We're still working to get Mayor Johnson connected, but we'll be ready to start here shortly.
Bert, you may unmute if you like. You are muted.
Okay. Okay. I got it. Thank you.
Hi, Bert.
Thank you.
Good to see you, Bert.
Thank you.
I'm glad to see you too, Bert.
Thank you. Got a little, yeah, no, I get it in there.
No worries.
Thank you.
Yeah.
You look fantastic as always, Bert.
Thank you. Thank you.
Michael, why do you look like Town Hall?
Yeah, he's got a fun background there.
He's trying to be the king.
So if anyone's on a phone or iPad, what's the button for sound? Is there like a volume button on there somewhere for you?
You're talking about to make your sound louder?
Yeah, the mayor doesn't have any sound. We're trying to get him sound.
Oh,
At the
All right,
front.
down at the bottom is a button that says join audio. He's gonna need to find the button that says join by audio.
Okay.
Is he on his phone, sir?
Yes, sir.
If you will swipe to the right, it should bring up a screen that says talk now. And then I think down at the very bottom, it will say connect with audio, internet audio, I think it says.
Okay.
Swipe right.
Well, we just heard you, Mayor. Can you hear us now?
I can hear you. Yeah.
Okay, great. All right. Well, and I think I got everyone we need here. So before we start, I just want to say a few words about our first virtual meeting here. There'll be a couple changes in procedure to accommodate this new format. First, when it comes to the public hearing, since I'm the moderator, I'll sort of identify if there's anyone not on the board who's interested in participating. I'll sort of help identify who raises their hand virtually to participate in that hearing. Of course, those will only be no more than 5 minutes for you to speak. Second, when it comes time to vote, I'll ask the mayor to take a roll call vote. So he'll call each commissioner by name and register their vote. That way we won't conflate their voices with the voices of others who are on the call. Third, I'll ask the commissioners to hold your questions until the designated time. During the presentations, we'll stop frequently to ask questions, for you to ask questions, but so that folks aren't talking over one another and making it hard for the moderator to identify, if you'll hold your questions till those designated times. And fourth, I'll ask everyone to keep themselves on mute until it's your time to speak. That way we won't have any feedback or any ambient noise that will prevent others from being able to hear. And then finally, the last thing is, please be patient. You've done that already, and I appreciate that. This is the first time we've done it. It's an experiment. It requires technology, which is always, you never know how well it's going to work. So please be patient with us as we get through our growing pains. So with that said, I'll throw it over to the mayor to start the meeting.
Hey, good evening, everyone. Can everybody hear me?
Yes, sir.
Yes.
Okay. It's great to hear from all you folk, and glad everybody's doing well. It's a very trying time for us, I know, and I do appreciate your patience with me. I'm far from being a technical person. Bert, it is good to hear from you and good to see you. And it's good to see each and every one of you. I would like to open the meeting with prayer. And after that, I would ask the chief if he would lead us in our pledge to the flag, if that's okay. Would that be appropriate, Wilson?
Yes, sir.
All right, let us pray. Our kind Heavenly Father, it's again, Lord, we come to you as humbly as we know how, thanking you, God, for the blessings of life that you have bestowed upon us, for the health and strength you blessed us with from day to day. And Lord, we pray, I know this is a very trying time for all of us going through this pandemic situation we're faced with. I pray your blessings upon each family represented. We pray your blessings upon our citizens throughout the town. And Lord, we just ask you to go with us through this meeting now. May we do it in due diligence and in respect to each and every one, and more especially in respect to you. And we thank you, Lord, for this, all the blessings of life that you bestow upon us. And we ask this all in Christ Jesus' holy name. Amen. Chief, if you would please lead us in the pledge.
Yes, sir. I pledge allegiance
Allegiance
To the flag
to the
Aye.
flag
of the
of the
United
United States of
United
America,
States of America,
to the republic
and to
of the republic
which it
States,
stands,
which stands
nation,
one nation
under God,
under
under
God,
God,
indivisible,
indivisible,
With
with
liberty.
with liberty and
justice.
justice for all.
Oh. Thank you, Chief. And if we do have any town citizens in our meeting, I would actually like to welcome them and thank them for participating. Wilson, I'm going to throw it back to you if
Yes,
that's
sir.
okay.
I'll add that this video is also being streamed on the Downtown North Wilkesboro Partnership YouTube channel. So for anyone out there searching YouTube today, they're watching us on that channel as well. So if anyone has any additions or deletions to the agenda, please name them now. If not, Mayor, if you wouldn't mind calling for approval of the agenda, calling for a motion.
At this time, I'd like to have a motion for the approval of the agenda as stated.
I make the motion that we approve the agenda as stated.
Thank you, Michael. Need a second, please.
Second,
Okay, thank you, Debbie. And all those in favor signify by a voice vote, one at a time, please.
Aye.
this is Debbie. Aye.
Okay,
This is Andrew. Aye.
okay,
This is Angela. I.
okay.
Bert's got his hands up. All right. So
Okay,
I got it.
says I too. Okay.
okay. All righty. All those, that's fine. Motion is approved. If everyone would just continue with the meeting, and Wilson, I'll throw it back to you.
Yes, sir. All right. So the next up is the public hearing. If you are a member of the public and you're interested in saying a few words, please raise your hand virtually. There should be a raise your hand button. Plug that in and we'll acknowledge you and give you your time to speak.
Okay, you want me to declare us into the public hearing, Wilson? Is that
No,
correct?
sir. No, sir. This is just the citizen input.
Oh, I got you. Okay.
Seeing none, I think we can move on to the next portion of the agenda.
Wilson, real quickly, where is the raise your hand button at?
Well, it depends on what
I'm on a computer.
device you're using.
Right.
Okay.
Computer,
Um,
or laptop.
where is that?
No worries. I'll just wave
Well,
my
there's
hand.
also at the bottom, you'll see a little menu that says reactions.
Okay.
Got a clap and a thumbs up. You can use that as well.
Okay. That's good.
Thank you.
All right, so let's move on to the consent items. For those of you who are millions of viewers who are watching, consent
Wilson?
items are, yes, sir.
Just right quick, if you click the participants button, It'll bring a list of all the participants, and at the bottom of that is a raise hand button at the bottom of the list of participants.
Okay.
Thank you, Michael.
Good advice. All right. So for our millions of viewers, the consent items are typically routine items that require commissioners' approval. They're usually non-controversial. They're things that the commissioners have heard about before. And if it's their pleasure, we can approve them all in one motion. But I would suggest that for the benefit of our audience, that we at least go through and say a few words on each one so that folks will know what we're talking about. Commissioners, is that all right with you?
That's a good point,
Yep.
Wilson.
All right. So the first one is, let me pull my agenda here so that everyone can see. The first item is approval of meeting minutes. And these are the official summaries of our last few board meetings. February 4th, regular meeting, February 27th, work session, February 27th, closed session. And Debbie sent those out to the board members earlier today.
Mhm.
March 6th, board retreat minutes, and March 26th, 2020 work session minutes. Once the board officially approves those, that will become the official record of those meetings, and they will be posted online to memorialize those meetings for all of history. So if anyone has any questions about those minutes, please ask them now. George Smith has raised his hand. George Smith, do you have a question?
Yeah, I just wanted to let you know, Heather wanted me to inform you that she got disconnected about 10 minutes ago and can't seem to get reconnected. So.
Okay.
I'm in now. Thank you, George.
Okay, you made it back.
Thank you.
All right. So if there are no questions or comments about the meetings, Mayor, is it okay if I ask for the motion?
Yes, sir. Please do.
Is there a motion to approve these minutes?
This is
Mayor,
Debbie.
I
I
make-
make a motion
Go ahead.
that we approve the minutes
I second that.
on the consent agenda.
Okay. Debbie motioned and Andrew seconded.
Yes.
All in favor, Andrew,
Aye.
Aye.
Angela.
Oh, sorry.
Oh, aye.
We're doing a roll call vote.
Sorry,
Commissioner
sorry,
Day,
sorry.
Commissioner Ferguson,
Aye.
Commissioner Hall,
Aye.
and Commissioner Parsons.
Aye.
Okay, so that's approved.
Okay.
All right, so we'll move on down to the next item. This might take me a minute to get through these. These were some long minutes here.
That's okay. We'll get through it.
Okay, Planning Board and Board of Adjustments appointments. I'll ask Meredith, our Planning Director, to say a few words on this item.
Okay, can everybody hear me?
Yes.
Okay, great. Hope everyone's doing well. Before you, we've got 2 appointments to go through. Since Michael is now our commissioner, his seat was vacant and we need an in-town for Planning Board and an in-town alternative for Board of Adjustment. Both of these seats will be essentially filling out the remainder of his terms. The Planning Board met on March 12th and they voted for Holly Minton to be the replacement for Planning Board. And then they recommended Otis Church for the Board of Adjustment as an alternative. Does anybody have any questions or?
And Holly was the what again, Meredith, please?
Holly Minton was planning board.
Okay, thank you.
Yep.
Is there a motion?
Aye.
I'll make the motion that we approve Holly Minton to the planning board and Otis Church as an alternate to the Board of Adjustment per the recommendation also of the planning board.
I'll second that motion. This is Debbie.
Okay. All right. So we'll go through again. Commissioner Palmer,
Aye.
Commissioner Day,
Aye.
Commissioner Ferguson,
Aye.
Commissioner Hall,
Aye.
Commissioner Palmer, or excuse me, Parsons.
Aye.
Okay. Excellent.
All right, thank you.
We got through it a little more efficiently that time. All right, let's scroll on down to the next topic. I'll also ask Meredith to say a few words on our next topic, which is an easement or a greenway extension.
Okay, so the Greenway Committee approached myself and Dale Shoemaker, our Public Works Director. They would like for a sidewalk to be built essentially right where Wilkesboro Avenue is with our ABC store, and it would go around. I'm not sure if there's like a map in your packet, you can see it. And it would essentially go through our property, and it would go by the ball fields, and it would connect to the new Mulberry Connection project. The Greenway Committee is promising $10,000 to cover, the sidewalk, and the town crews are essentially going to be the ones who's going to build it, and we would have a contractor come in and pour the concrete. Since the Greenway is right by the floodway, part of the sidewalk connecting it will be in the floodway, so we will have to do a no rise study. That study luckily was done when they did the Mulberry Connection project, so we can use that, the same engineers, and they will ensure that we're not having any rise to our floodway and issue a no rise certificate.
That's great.
Yeah. And this will be a huge connection from our downtown to our existing greenway.
You may think it's kind of unusual that we have to grant an easement to ourselves, and typically we wouldn't have to because we'll never intend to take this sidewalk up. But if the land were to ever change hands, this would preserve the sidewalk easement and the connection to the greenway.
Yep.
Okay, is there a motion?
I'll do it. I would like to make a motion to grant an easement dedicating town-owned property near 241 Wilkesboro Avenue to the town of North Wilkesboro and Yadkin Valley Greenway Committee.
Thank you.
I will second that. Angela.
Okay, Commissioner Palmer,
Aye.
Commissioner Day,
Aye.
Commissioner Ferguson,
Aye.
Commissioner Hall,
Yes.
Commissioner Parsons.
Yes.
All right. We'll move down to the next item. Okay, so this is my item. This is a report that the state requires we present to you. And we're doing it here in this formal setting just so we'll have it on record that you all got this information. I won't go over it in detail, but I encourage you to read the report. And I'll be happy to answer any questions. In a minute, when I ask for a motion, it will essentially be just to affirm that you've received the report, and we can record that in the minutes. Hearing no questions, is there a motion?
Wilson, I'll make the motion that the town board has received the pension spiking report from you, our town manager.
Thank you.
I'll second that motion.
Okay, Commissioner Palmer,
Yes, aye.
Commissioner Day,
Aye.
Commissioner Ferguson,
Aye.
Commissioner Hall,
Yes.
Commissioner Parsons.
Aye.
Okay. Scrolling on down, our last administrative item of the evening is a series of budget amendments. 4 of the 5 budget amendments are to account for and close 4 grants we received from outside sources. This is just an action that accounting practices require us to make. And the 5th one, which is the amendment for the FEMA SAFER grant, is to amend our budget ordinance to receive the revenue from that grant. So these are just a series of administrative maneuvers that we have to make and get you all's approval for. And I'll be happy to answer any more detailed questions if you have any. If not, is there a motion?
I'll make a motion to approve the series of budget amendments to clean up and close a series of town projects and receive and appropriate funds for the North Wilkesboro Fire Department FEMA SAFER grant.
I'll second that motion.
Okay, Commissioner Palmer,
Yes.
Commissioner Day,
Aye.
Commissioner Ferguson,
Aye.
Commissioner Hall,
Aye.
Commissioner Parsons.
Aye.
Okay, thank you. Okay, so the next item on the agenda, I'm going to go back up here to the top, is our town manager and attorney's report. I just have a brief report on coronavirus preparations. We had our interagency meeting today, and I have to report that all the public agencies that are involved in the coronavirus response are managing well. That's not to say there aren't challenges. We, like everyone else, are have a limited supply of PPE and are having a hard time finding new ones, but we're not at a critical level yet. All the agencies are still have some on hand and are able to find donations and other sources of that material for now. As for the state of emergency declaration and the corresponding prohibitions that we put in place, the public is complying with those quite well. Neither of the town police departments or the sheriff's department have had much trouble enforcing those so far. Folks seem to be getting the message and socially distancing voluntarily, staying home, except for trips to the grocery store and other essential needs. And so I think we're doing pretty well so far as a community. And the other agencies are cautiously optimistic that our response is helping. Statewide, the data that the governor has shared over the last few days is encouraging because it shows that the curve is flattening, and that if we maintain the social distancing and the stay at home and the other measures that have been put into place through the months of April and May, that we will flatten the curve enough so that our available hospital beds could accommodate all the patients. And so we're doing pretty well, keeping our fingers crossed that we haven't reached the peak yet. That's still a few weeks away, But when that comes, we should have enough hospital beds statewide to accommodate the need. Any questions or comments from the board on that?
During the conversation you listened to or the meeting you had, did they mention, what's going to change, I guess, with the projections as far as, okay, now, we're past the peak, but what keeps that from happening again as far as another spike in cases or something? Did they address that?
We haven't talked about that yet. And
Okay.
I think we'd have to get some medical experts in here to talk about the conditions under which another wave would occur, and to guide us on what kind of measures we'd need to put into place to prevent that.
Okay, thank you.
This part of the agenda is also the town attorney's report. Daniel, do you have a report?
Can you hear me?
Yes, sir.
Yes.
Okay, but I had some trouble with this earlier. I don't have a report. It seems like a lot of what I've done over the past few weeks has been involved in coronavirus. And I'll say that Mr. Hooper has been very much on top of things and worked very diligently, not only himself, but also with the town of Wilkesboro and with the county. And so I think we're staying more than a few steps ahead. So that's a very good thing.
Thank you, sir. All right, so I'm going to move on to the next part of the agenda, which is a budget discussion. And I've actually got some remarks that I want to make. The purpose of this item is to have our first presentation on the state of our FY21 budget. As you know, the budget is our most significant policy document. It's the platform where the board's vision gets carried out. And it's no accident that we hold the board retreat at the start of the budget season, because people in my position, town managers, need to know what the board's vision is before we start figuring out how to pay for it. Budget development is also an iterative process. Not only do you all need to negotiate back and forth amongst yourselves what you want to be in there, but there are so many different variables to a budget that one change, and in fact, not just an actual change, but merely the possibility of a change to a single variable, means that we've got to recalculate the whole thing. So today is just the first of a handful of meetings I hope we can have here in the coming weeks to discuss this budget. As you might have guessed, the virus and the corresponding economic slowdown have had an impact on nearly all the variables that go into our budget. Essentially, we had to start over in the month of March. And depending on what happens in the coming weeks, we may have to start over again, and perhaps again in the coming months. Our advocates at the League of Municipalities are aware of the awkward position that cities and towns are in right now. They know that we have a statutory deadline looming. We have to pass a budget by July 1st, but they also know that the uncertainty that's around us makes putting together an accurate forecast nearly impossible. And so I'm going to bring up something on the screen here. On Friday, they sent this letter to the General Assembly asking for a series of actions to help cities and towns through the current crisis. I'll leave this letter up on the screen so that you can read it while I make my remarks. As you can see, it's only 4 days old, so there hasn't been much action, but we're hoping that there will be soon. In addition to this letter, the League has also, through channels, intimated to the General Assembly that the July 1st budget deadline is going to be challenging for cities and towns, and that they've also asked the General Assembly for some clarification on the legality of what we're doing right now, which is holding a virtual meeting. National legislation. The federal stimulus package known as the CARES Act will not provide any direct relief for revenue loss to towns our size. In fact, for every town in the state except for Charlotte, the money will actually pass through the state. So we'll be applying to the state of North Carolina for this money, and will only be used to reimburse town for pandemic related expenses. So I'll stop here and entertain any questions that the board has.
Wilson, I have a question. What do you see, what do we used in pandemic expenses? What do you see that, how is that?
We've bought some PPE and things like that, but we haven't undertaken a budget breaking expense yet.
Okay.
So we'll keep our documentation and we'll seek reimbursement for those expenses. But if they're expenses we have to swallow, we'll absorb them. All right. So with that context in mind, I'd like to move on to a discussion of our budget. My presentation here comes in two parts. The first is a brief review of our balanced budget draft. And second is a review of my proposed capital investment plan, or CIP, for future planning. Even though, as you'll see, the FY21 budget has few new investments, it's important to consider the CIP now because we need to take some steps in FY21 to prepare ourselves for the years ahead. Okay, the FY21 budget. It's actually two budgets. The general fund, which is traditional services like police, fire, parks, administration, and our water and sewer budget, which is obvious what that is. We'll start with the general fund, which I've just put up on the screen there. This draft budget that I'm presenting to you assumes that we hold steady with our current property tax rate of 52 cents per $100 of valuation. I'd like to make a little commentary here. This rate is decidedly middle of the road. It's 4 cents higher than Wilkesboro. Theirs is 48. It's 3 cents lower than Elkin. Theirs is 55. So it is average. If people tell you that we have a high tax rate, you can tell them that that's plain not true. Our neighbor next door in the county has a higher tax rate than us. Ours is average. To put this in terms that I think are easier to understand, if you're a homeowner and your home is valued at $175,000, in North Wilkesboro, you'll pay $910 in town property tax. In Wilkesboro, you'll pay $840, and in Elkin, you'll pay $962.50. So drawing your attention to the form on the screen, the revenue here is a combined revenue figure. If we hold budget workshops in the coming weeks, we will bring broken out figures to you so that you can see the revenue in each area. This number, of course, as I suggested, is made up of a number of sources. Property tax is the foundation of our revenue, but it's only about 1/3 of the total revenue. Property tax is actually pretty stable, and it's not going to change much in the coming fiscal year. If the economic downturn lasts a few years, then yeah, a few years from now, we'll probably see our property tax diminish. But for the moment, it's going to be pretty stable, and it's going to buttress our entire budget. It's the foundation, as I said, but we all know that when it comes to building things, there's more than just the foundation. There's the joists, the framing, the roof, all sorts of other things. In our case, sales tax revenue are the joists, hospital money is the framing, and fees are the roof. And each of those things are going to be impacted by the slowdown. So because of that, I've projected in my column, which is the second one from the right, you can see my cursor here going over my column, a total revenue figure that's several $100,000 less than what we are collecting in the current year. This is my way of acknowledging that sales tax, interest income, and fees, which are all important parts of our revenue, are going to drop. This event is so unprecedented that there's not even much confidence out there in how much they're going to drop, just that they're gonna. So this number is our best guess today and may need to be adjusted again in the future. Let me give you an example. A few minutes ago, I talked about the League of Municipalities. Each year, they put out a document that projects sales tax and other revenues for the coming year. And most years, they present pretty focused projections that have a high degree of certainty. This year, the document came chock full of caveats, and they presented ranges rather than focused projections. They've also said that the whole document might need to be revised as more data comes in the coming weeks. So sales tax is the hardest one to pin down. Usually, or typically, there's a 3-month lag between when the taxes are collected and when we get the collection information from the state. So this month, April, we're only getting information from January. We're not going to see the figures from March when the emergency started until June, which is too late. Clearly, sales tax is going to be affected, but we don't know by how much. If you ask me, I would say that there'd be a spike in early March as people stocked up, then a significant dip that'll last until who knows when. The silver lining, if there is one, and there is a small one, is that grocery sales are up, and that increase may actually retard the dip in revenue somewhat. Also, starting last February, the state started collecting sales tax on more types of online sales. So we'll actually see a little bit more revenue in that area than we would have last year. The league's prediction as of now is that FY21 collections will be down 4% statewide. That doesn't sound like a lot, but they were predicting a 5% increase. And so that's actually a 9-point swing from a 5% increase to a 4% decrease in the new year. For budgetary purposes, we forecasted a 10% reduction in our sales tax revenue because our economy isn't as strong as it is in some other places of the state. And so our decrease is probably going to be a little higher than average. In dollars, this equates to about $160,000 in lost revenue. All right, interest income will be the next hardest hit. Most of our interest income comes from the hospital money that we have invested. So before I get farther into the discussion on interest income, I want to say that the good news is that most of our hospital money is unaffected for now. Our $1 million rent payment will still come in. Our prorated share of the 30-year lease payment, which is about $466,000, will come in. And our financial advisors at the moment are telling us that at least 2/3 of our interest income is guaranteed. So that's good. But that other 1/3 is still subject to the vagaries of the market. Right now, in an effort to prop up the economy and keep money flowing, the Fed has lowered the interest rate to almost 0. And that might help as a stimulating measure for the economy, but it's bad news for us who counts on investment income. If that interest rate stays low throughout the year, we predict that we'll earn about $140,000 less in interest income than we would have otherwise. All right, let's turn to fees. In our budget are various fees for things like zoning permits, building permits. I'm also considering the money that people pay when they go to the pool, or the money that they pay when they camp in our campground, our fire department campground during MerleFest as fees. So I'm lumping them into this pot as well. Individually, those fees are small, but if you lump them together, they make up a noticeable part of the budget. Zoning and building fees are typically aligned with economic activity, so clearly they're going to drop. The pool fees may recover if we get the all clear here in the next month. And even if we don't, we'll just defer some of those expenses that we need to make to get the pool ready, and that'll offset that loss in revenue. But the loss of the fire department camping fees is actually going to be felt over 2 years. In the current year, we're refunding money to people who are asking for it, while others are asking that a payment be applied to next year's fee. So we won't make that revenue next year. So we're actually going to lose money 2 years in a row on that. Fortunately, the big fees like our $300,000+ solid waste revenue from that fee will stay intact. And if I can actually take an aside here, I want to share with you something about fees. Before the virus hit, I was considering recommending to you all an increase in a number of our fees so that we could fully recover the cost of providing that service. My philosophy behind that recommendation was that if the benefit of a service is borne exclusively by an individual, like it is with a permit, that they should be responsible for most, if not all, of the cost. I had the students from Appalachian who are helping me with the budget primed and ready to go to do some analysis and figure out what the new fees should be. But then the virus came and the economy started suffering. So keeping these the same, which I'm now recommending that we do for this budget, and keeping them the same is essentially saying keeping them subsidized in part by the taxpayer and the town is a small way that we can support economic recovery. So between all those drops in revenue, altogether they account for a projection that's about 4% lower than what we're collecting this year. And honestly, I think that's being hopeful, and we might have to look at that again in the coming weeks. So I'm going to pause here for any questions. Okay, if not, let's move on to expenses.
I've got a question, Wilson.
Yes, sir.
For the projection for the sales tax, what are you basing that on? Is that from the information from the league at 4% or?
Yeah.
Okay.
They're projecting that it's going to fall 4%. They're actually projecting that it's going to fall upwards of 20% here in the current year, but that in the new year, the dip will be only 4%. But we're, just to be conservative, tacking on a little bit of an extra dip here locally.
And for the fees, you're saying like the water and sewer fees?
So that comes later. This is things like, an ABC fee or a fee for a zoning application. The water and sewer fees are a separate category that we'll talk about here shortly.
Okay.
All
So
right.
the fees that we spoke about, the pool and the camping, how much money are we talking about there?
I don't know exactly. I'll have that information when we meet at the budget workshop, but altogether tens of thousands.
Okay. Thank you.
Okay, so I'm going to draw your attention now to the sort of bottom 2/3 of this sheet, which is the expenditures. I want to describe a couple of variables that help shape our expenditures. The first is that I'm recommending, and I'm including here in my expenditures, a 2.5% cost of living adjustment for eligible employees. This is an acknowledgement of the importance of the workforce and of our solemn obligation to keep them whole during this downturn. Up until a few weeks ago, a 2.5% cost of living increase was more than inflation as reflected in the consumer price index. But in the last few weeks, the CPI has gone up a little bit and it's sitting now at about 2.5%. So what that means is that if we don't give our employees a 2.5% cost of living adjustment, it's almost like their pay is going to be cut because they're going to be paying more for goods out on the open market. So I've proposed that we include that in our budget. This amount amounts to approximately $75,000 of real dollars. Second, an appropriation of approximately $140,000 for a full-time town attorney. This is a concept that you all asked me to explore, and so I included it in the budget. But I'll confess that this may be a nice to have that we could cut to afford other things. A full-time attorney is not needed to keep the lights on. I think it could have enhanced our service, but we can get by without it. However, I will say this, that even if you ultimately decide to stick with the part-time model, I think that budget needs to go up a little bit. Gary was giving us a hometown discount, and I think that on the open market, we'd actually get charged more than what we were paying him. And so if you do decide to go back to that option, it's only going to be about an $80,000 savings rather than $100,000, which it would have been before. Third, reduced funding for nonprofits. So we got requests from about a dozen or so nonprofits totaling $126,650. My budget recommends that we fund approximately $85,150. And I'll go over the specifics of that at our workshop here in the coming weeks. The nonprofits that I recommend we fund the most and whether that's all of their requests or a majority of their requests, are agencies that I think can help us with the fallout of the economic downturn. So when I was trying to come up with some criteria to decide which ones of those to fund, their ability to help us recover from the downturn was the criteria that I used. All right. Our expenses also include debt service on projects that are already committed. So things that we've been paying off for the last few years, and now we've got a few more things to go. We've got money in the budget for that, of course. But that means no new borrowing for FY21. All right, and then the big item of expense is, of course, the departmental operating budgets. I can say proudly that even though these numbers here are lower than they were the year before and lower than what the departments originally requested, they are high enough to fund all services. So we won't lose any services with these figures here. I've actually asked the department heads to submit 2 budgets to me. The first, back in February, was an operating budget that maintained current service levels and gave them a little cushion to fund some additional things. But when the economy started to turn, I asked them to go back and submit to me a second budget that had a 10% cut. I said, you can do it with a scalpel or you can do it with an axe, but come back with 10% cut. And candidly, some couldn't meet the 10% cut without cutting their services. But everyone made a good faith effort, and we were able to come back with budgets that met our requirements and without cutting services. We got to those numbers through efficiencies only. And so next year, if these are the numbers we go with, those departments are going to have to work really, really hard to stay within those figures. But if they can, we'll be able to get through the year with all of our existing services. All right, and then finally, the one area, if you're looking closely at the numbers, you'll see that's actually larger is the fire department budget. And we've talked about this before. This is no surprise. The reason why theirs is larger is because it includes the grant funds from FEMA. And it also includes a little bit of extra local dollars to fund an additional engineer, so an additional full-time firefighter. And the reason why we had to do this is because with the additional folks that we were going to hire with the grant money, that put us over the limit for the Fair Labor Standards Act. Once you hire 5 full-time people, and if you add up all our full-time plus the part-time people we exceeded 5. That means that anyone who works more than their scheduled hours was going to have to pay overtime. And in a volunteer fire department, oftentimes you're asking the full-time people to come back in and volunteer. Well, we can't do that anymore. We'd have to pay them overtime. And so one way or the other, either by paying these folks the overtime, which the law requires us to do, or by hiring a new person, we were going to have to pay more. And so after some discussion, we decided to hire a new person. That way we can give an emerging public servant a chance to work for the town. And also it'll ensure that we have fresh people there responding to the calls rather than just 3 people working long shifts over and over again. So we're going to hire a 4th person full-time for the fire department. All right, I'm going to pause here and receive any questions. All right.
Wilson, I'm glad that you are going to add the 4th person to the fire department, because I think that will help us move along toward a more effective coverage for our citizens. And I'm glad you were able to find a way to afford to do that.
Good point, Debbie.
Okay.
So sorry,
go ahead.
Will we still have the FEMA grant money for part-time guys?
Yes.
Yes.
And so what's happened, we have, Can you explain one more time the overtime thing?
Sure. So before we hired the extra folks that the grant enabled us to hire, we were below 5 full-time positions at the fire department.
We had 3.
And we had 3 and then a couple half-time. So we
Yeah.
were just under 5. And so therefore we were exempt from the Fair Labor Standards Act requirements. Once we went over 5, all of a sudden those requirements applied to us. And those requirements are that when folks work more than their assigned hours, you got to pay them overtime. The way our staffing is situated, particularly when we have a diminishing number of volunteers, we were asking those full-time people to come back in. And before, we could pay them at the volunteer rate, which is like $25 a call or something. I don't know exactly what it is, but it's something nominal. But now we can't do that anymore. Now, if they come back in, we have to pay them their full wage plus half, so time and a half. So in order to effectively fight fires and have the coverage that we needed, we were going to be paying more anyway. And so we figured that we're going to pay more, we might as well hire another person with that money. We did some figuring, and it was honestly not a wash. We calculated that we'd be paying about the same in overtime that we would the salary of a full-time person. So we chose the full-time person.
Because otherwise you'd be paying the same money for not giving somebody the opportunity to.
Yes, sir. That's it.
Will this person be a 12-hour shift like the other engineers, or?
Jimmy, you're on the call, right? Could you answer that question? He was on before.
He may be muted.
It's
Yeah.
okay, Wilson.
Jimmy,
Thank you.
Okay. Well, anyway, I think the answer is yes.
Okay.
All right, let's move on to the water sewer fund. I've pulled that up on your screen here. I'll start right out by saying that the figures presented here have not factored in a rate increase, but we will need a rate increase in FY21 to help us start saving for some of the large capital investments we need to make in the coming years. I'll explain a little bit more about that later. Our water system will be affected by the downturn, but probably to a lesser degree than the general fund. There's 2 reasons for this. First, most of our water is sold to wholesale customers, the rural water associations, who are made up mostly of residential users. So their consumption won't drop off much and honestly might go up a little bit. Second, our in-town customer base is split between residential and commercial customers. And there's a healthy enough number of residential customers so that we're not dependent on the commercial consumption. If it drops, and it will, it'll be noticeable, but we won't live and die by commercial consumption like some other water systems do. Also, both residential and commercial customers in town pay the same rate. So even if we lose some in one area, if we make up for it in the other area, it'll be a wash for us. So far, we've been monitoring and our consumption is only down 2%. 2%. If we can keep that level, we'll probably be okay. So we're monitoring that. The bigger risk to our water revenue is not consumption, but it's a risk that it's kind of hard to explain. It's a risk that we've tried to project, but it's so new and there's such little information on it that we haven't made a projection. And that is, as you know, last week, the governor issued an executive order prohibiting utilities from cutting off service for non-payment. We were going to do this anyway. This was one of the powers you gave me at our last meeting. But the very next day, the governor issued his executive order and forced our hand. And so essentially this takes away the ability we have to compel people to pay. I think it's the right thing to do. I'm not complaining. I don't want to cut off anyone's water during the crisis and make it hard for them to wash their hands. But there's a risk to our revenue because if people don't pay their bills, there's no way we can compel them to do it. So that's the risk. We don't know how much of a risk it is, but it's out there. Just to make it clear to our millions of viewers, you're still on the hook for those fees after the state of emergency ends. They aren't being waived. They're just being deferred. But for the commissioners, it matters to us when we get that money. So even though it'll be deferred and we may get it 6 or 8 months from now, it'd be more helpful to have it soon when we need it. And so if we see a dip here, it will affect us.
Right.
Like I said, there's not a lot of information that guides our projection on this. But we have projected that between lower consumption and decreased collection, our water revenue will also fall 10% in the new year. So just to reiterate, there are some risks to the water fund, but it's a little safer than the general fund is. But we are going to need a rate increase to prepare us for some of the big expenses we're going to have in the coming years. And in the budget workshops in the coming weeks, we can talk about this in more detail. I want to share with you that Dale Shoemate has already begun reaching out to the rural water associations and sharing with them that we're considering raising the rates. This notice is contractually required in at least 2 of the 4 cases. And the other thing that's contractually required is we have to notify them of the new rate that we want to impose by May the 15th. So we do need to discuss this at a budget workshop here in the next few weeks. With that said, staff needs about another week or so to run some scenarios and to do a little bit more analysis to figure out what the rate should be. So we'll do that. And when we meet in a few weeks for the budget workshop, we'll bring a recommendation to you all and hopefully get your assent to that at the time so we can notify them. And I'll pause here for any questions on the water sewer fund before I proceed. All right, hearing none, I will move on to capital investment plan, CIP. I might also slip up and call it a capital improvement plan, but it's the same thing. A capital investment plan is a 10-year forecast of significant capital expenses. I just want to clarify, this isn't the budget. The things listed in the FY21 column on your screen are in the budget, or we're going to try to get them in the budget. But this is merely a planning document. Excuse me, I lost my place here. It's merely a planning document. It's also aspirational. As you can see, if you look out there, those numbers get pretty high. We're not going to be able to afford to do everything on here, and we'll revisit it every year at budget time. But having all these projects listed in one place, having these estimates, at least gives us something to work towards. And so we're going to ask for your seal of approval on this plan. And then this is going to be what we work towards in the coming years to try to build. All right, so you're looking at the current water and sewer capital investment plan. The numbers here at the top where my cursor are, these first 9 lines or so, these are the things that we have committed to. So we have to pay these. These are commitments we've made. The things down here on the lower 2/3 of the page is our wish list. And some of those are more important than others, and I'll go over that in a minute. But just remember as we're talking that this top part is what we are committed to paying. All right.
Wilson, I'm not seeing
Not either.
what are you showing us? Because I'm still on the water fund. My page is still on the water fund.
Excuse me. I'm sorry. Apologies. How about now? Are you seeing a spreadsheet?
Yeah, that works.
Apologies. All right. So just to reiterate, the top 10 lines or so are the things we're committed to. The bottom 2/3 is our wish list. So the colors do have meaning. The colors help define the priority of the projects. Yellow items are the most important things. These are things that I like to say help us keep the lights on. The next priority is red. The sort of fun expression I use for red
Come around the deck.
red items are things that comply with the big guy. So those are things that help us meet regulations or comply with state and federal regulations. Green are what I call risk managers. These are projects that are designed to prevent or head off a more costly condition down the road. Next up are purple. These are service enhancers. These are things that will improve our level of service or physically beautify the town, but are not necessary. And then you don't see any of this color on this page, but you will on the general fund page. Blue are what I call nice to haves. Those are really low priority. There are things that are making it better, but don't really protect us from any type of risk. Okay. But sticking to the top portion for a moment, particularly the FY22 column, you can see that our liabilities are high in FY22. It's the perfect storm of the first year of a couple of our new projects and the last year of one of our old projects, the Carscott intake. And so for that 1 year, we've got quite a bit of liabilities there. So we'll need to bump our revenue up in order to afford this and not use up all our savings. I'll pause here for any questions on the water sewer CIP.
Glad to see the water tank is a high priority, highest priority.
In future year 22, is that the last of the Carscott?
Yes, sir. That'll be the last payment.
And do you have any updates on the ActiveFlow stuff? I know we haven't talked about it in a while.
I need to talk with Matt Shoesmith from Kimley Horn. He's updating our report that's due to the state, and he'll submit that in May. And we'll need to wait for them to approve, but hopefully they'll do that quickly and we can go out to bid soon after that.
Okay.
I don't have an update on the status of the CDBG from the state yet. We heard from them today. They're still reviewing it. I think it's going to be postponed farther just because most of the state people are working from home and their turnaround times have decreased. So no confirmation from them yet, but we do, of course, have confirmation from Golden Leaf on their contribution. All right. Any more comments or questions on that? So I'm going to move over to the general fund now. Did that change? Is everyone seeing the new spreadsheet up there now?
Yeah.
All right. So I won't go into too much detail on these, but you can see here, again, the ones at the top are the ones we're committed to. The ones at the bottom are our wish list. Very few of those here in the new year. In fact, I should move those over. But this list is a little less intimidating. But even so, in FY22, as you can see, our wish list totals up to be pretty expensive. And tomorrow morning, I'll send you all electronic copies of this for you to review on your own. And then, of course, we'll submit it to you again as part of the package we'll create for you for the budget workshops.
Just so I'm reading these right, Wilson, when I'm looking at the numbers at the top where it says like completed, paying off, that means the project's completed, but we're paying it off for the following years.
That's right.
Okay, thank you.
Okie doke. Any final comments or questions on that? All right, so I'm almost finished. I've been talking for a while, so just I'll let you know that I'm almost finished. But I do want to summarize. So the highlights are: there's great uncertainty regarding our revenue sources. I've proposed a smaller general fund budget as a hedge against extended economic downturn. Water and sewer revenues are based largely on consumption, and we have little data to inform us on what those consumption patterns are going to look like. I've also proposed a smaller budget in the water and sewer area as a hedge against falling consumption. A rate increase is needed no matter what the consumption patterns look like to help us start saving money for capital projects over the next few years. The CIPs are not the budget, but they are a 10-year forecast of our capital needs and a planning document to help the staff, which I ask you to approve at the same time as the budget here in a month or so. Let's see, that's pretty much all I have to say. So I'll be happy to take questions now.
Wilson, is there any chance that the water usage could be up since people are home?
Yes.
How long would it take to see that? A few months?
Let's see. Do we have Dale on here? We have real time. Let's see. There's Dale. Dale, we have real time, pretty much real time consumption information, right?
We can tell the consumption for each day. So we'll be able to tell right away what our water usage is doing. But thankfully, it's holding pretty steady right now. It's 2% is almost normal.
So, Commissioner Palmer, not an increase so far, but not a really significant decrease either.
Okay, thank you.
Any other questions or comments?
Now, all of this, talking about all these numbers, it is still subject to negotiation and back and forth, correct? I mean, none of this is, other than those hard costs, none of this is confirmed or set in stone until we talk about it, right?
That's correct. So I'll recommend something, but if you all have a difference of opinion, obviously that's what we'll do. I hope that if you do want to do something different than what I've proposed, that we can at least sort of negotiate that in a structured way so that we can talk about the impacts and the trade-offs and so forth of shifting those numbers around. If you decide, for example, not to go with the full-time attorney, you'll have some money that you could allocate to different departments or to different programs there as well.
What's the deadline to figure all the budget stuff out that you have set, Wilson?
So we have to have it approved by July 1. That's in statute. And I'm hoping that we can do it at our June regular meeting. And so this will segue us into the next item on the agenda. And that is, I think no, there it is. Next item on the agenda, which is our meeting calendar. We've got a regular meeting scheduled for May, a regular meeting and a work session scheduled for both May and June. I'm hoping that we can have a series of budget workshops here in the coming weeks, and then present a more refined budget for you at your May 5th work session, and perhaps even have the statutorily required public meeting or public input, public hearing at that time, and then approve the budget on June the 2nd. Now, with that said, I think that we might need to plan on pushing those both back to the later meetings in the month, because there is a lot of uncertainty and there are a lot of changes right now, and that gives us more time to sort of know what the environment is before we commit to something. But the risk of doing that is that if you wait till June 25th, a week before July 1, and something goes wrong, then you got to call a special meeting, and you run a lot of risk waiting that long. But there's just so many moving parts that it might not be realistic to commit as early as June the 2nd.
Can I say one thing?
Yes, Connie.
We're supposed to present it to the board by June 1st.
Right.
And they adopt it by by June 30 or by July 1st. And normally we call for the public hearing in May and have it the 1st of June. But even though the board don't have to approve it till July or to the last meeting in June, we still are supposed to present it to the board by June 1.
Wilson, let me interject a little there, please. I think it's mandated that we have to have it approved by June 30.
Correct.
I'm pretty sure.
Start of the fiscal year.
Yeah, fiscal year. Yeah. But anyways, we normally have all that done, and I think we can meet that criteria this year also. I just wanted to say thank you, Connie, for those comments.
So the first thing is to set a couple of budget workshops here for later in the month. But looking at the calendar, it occurred to me that the work session that we canceled for April 23rd to accommodate MerleFest, we might could hold now. And so perhaps the solution is to put that one back on the calendar and just have our in-depth look at the budget be the one and only topic for a work session on that.
Wilson, when we were originally scheduled these, we scheduled one like on a Tuesday, and then 2 days later scheduled one on a Thursday, because I think we had skipped a day between, so we did a Tuesday and a Thursday. Could we not, in fact, I would rather be more proactive on, especially now with the importance of getting these numbers sane and trying to figure out how we're going to manage through this next fiscal year, especially. I'd rather see us start sooner than later to make a plan. So I would almost like to see us do like the 21st and the 23rd, which is a Tuesday and a Thursday of that week, and meet just like we are here to try to get this, try to work these wrinkles out. Because I mean, to be honest with you, you've thrown a lot of wrinkles at us that, the board has not had to address in a long time, because I guess 2008 was probably the last time this town has suffered as big of concerns with numbers. So I think it's very important that we start on it sooner than later.
Yes, sir. The staff can accommodate whatever dates you all choose.
I like that suggestion, Michael.
I do too.
I do too. I don't mind meeting twice in 1 week, and we may still have to react to things that occur that we can't foresee.
Yeah.
Mr. Parsons, are you suggesting that we hold these during business hours or in the evening?
Well, my schedule these days is pretty flexible, so I'm pretty good with either way. I mean, so I would leave it up to what is convenient for everybody. But if memory serves me correct, we had blocked approximately 4 hours per session when we did that. I think it was a 1 to 5. Am I correct?
Yes, sir.
That's right.
So to me, a 1 to 5, 2 to 6, I think that might, that would work for me, but also an evening session. It's just that if you start so late in the evening and it drags on into, 8, 9 o'clock, then you're interfering with people's dinner time and wind down time. So, if it works, I'd rather do it in the afternoon,
Okay.
but I am flexible.
I think that having it in the afternoon is more convenient for staff, since we will ask them to attend these sessions to answer detailed questions. And so I think it's more accommodating for them to do it during business hours.
I like that idea, Michael.
I agree as well. I'd like to, be home around in the evening. I think better during business hours by the time I get home.
Okay, so Commissioner Parsons, will you make a motion? Put your request in the form of a motion, please.
Yes. I request that we have 2 budget work sessions on April the 21st from 1 o'clock in the afternoon until 5 o'clock in the afternoon, and then a follow-up budget session on Thursday, April the 23rd from 1 o'clock in the afternoon to 5 o'clock in the afternoon.
I'll second that motion.
Okay, Commissioner Palmer,
Yes.
Commissioner Day,
Aye.
Commissioner Ferguson,
Aye.
Aye.
Commissioner Hall,
Aye.
okay, and Commissioner Parsons.
Aye.
And Mayor, that is convenient for you too?
It is. I'm flexible either way, and it is convenient for me.
Okay.
Yep.
So we'll add that back to the calendar, and of course, that's a public meeting, and so we'll advertise that.
That's right.
We'll hold it over this forum, but we'll try to send you more information beforehand on the details.
Please.
Wilson, just right quick, was Marty able to make this meeting?
I saw his name on there earlier, so I
Okay.
presume he's there. There he is. Yeah, his name's on the screen, so.
Okay.
All right, so let's get this out of here. So we're almost finished here. So last item on the agenda, mayor and council topics. Does anyone have any hot topics that they'd like to discuss?
I'd like to ask, are you getting any feedback about issues of our lawn waste and things like that? How's people doing that?
Dale, did you hear that question? So if Dale, hang on. Dale, say again, you were muted.
I haven't got any feedback from the public yet. I don't think a lot of people realizes that we've stopped the brush pickup and large appliance pickup because there's still a lot of stuff being put out that we're not picking up.
Yeah, I agree with you there. I think what happened is people worked on the weekend, and so everybody had already done a lot of the work and the waste before they realized we weren't going to be picking it up.
All right.
Yeah. We'll try to improve our outreach so that folks know that some of our services are being dialed back for the time being, and hopefully prevent All right. If anyone else has any other comments.
I got a couple. One, Bert, it's good to see you, Commissioner Hall.
Thank you. Thank you.
Good to see you, man. And Wilson and Robert, thank you guys for all you're doing to keep us like kind of on the forefront of the stuff with the coronavirus and being proactive. I think you've done a really good job. Thank you all.
Thank you, Andrew. I'll give everybody else a chance to say anything they want to, but I'm gonna if nobody else has anything.
Your Honor,
Yes.
this is Heather from the Record newspaper. Did you have a press release or something that you could email to us that we could stick in there for you? Hopefully more people. Would that help?
Yes.
Are you asking about like the service changes?
Yes.
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 Okay.
I'll
So
send that to you.
you can email us. I'm sure Marty and I are both glad to make that happen. Hey, Marty. Sorry, I just fell and told you.
We'll get that to you.
Okay, awesome. Thank you.
Thank you, Heather.
I want to say I'm looking forward to meeting you all in an actual boardroom again. I kind of like sitting close and close, so hopefully see you there soon.
I just look forward to having Bert sitting beside me so I don't feel so alone at the end of the dais there.
Oh.
No kidding.
I hear you.
Well, I gotta say, if we had a meeting with all these attendees, we would have been breaking the law. So
breaking the law.
We had to do it this way.
It is good to see you, Bert.
Thank you.
Yes.
Yep, it is, Bert. I'm going to close mine out with this, and I know we're probably getting close to closing the meeting out anyway, but I really want to tell each and every one of you how much I appreciate your due diligence to participate in serving the public and serving our town. And as Wilson was saying, and some other comments about brush pickup and that kind of stuff, there are some calls. I'm getting a few from people, and I'm sure Wilson is, but we're just telling them that due to the coronavirus thing and all the stuff that's going on, we're just cutting back till we can get back to normal. And I hope and pray, my prayer is that we can be back to normal by the time we have our next town board meeting. And I love and appreciate each and every one of you, and thank you for all your support that you have for our citizenry and for our town. That's all I've got.
So, Mayor, are you ready to adjourn?
I am. I'd like to call for a motion to adjourn.
So move.
All those in favor, click your little clicker and turn the videos off.
All right.
We kind of the Brady Bunch.
Okay, Angela, I heard that.
Just a little
Okay.